to we'll all right, perfect. Well, welcome everyone to the Rewards Mastermind. And so the Rewards Mastermind is a podcast where we're helping rewards professionals elevate their game, basically, and bringing out all the new concepts and systems that are available out there, so that we keep on top of in the know, I guess you could say. So today we have a very special guest with us, Danielle Boris. And so Danielle is the CEO of Sandbox, and she's very busy. As you can see, she has her book right behind her back there, The Energy of Weirdos, which is a great read. And then plus, Danielle, you have a podcast, Unboxing Humans, as well. So it's and we're going to talk about all these things. And from what I understand, you're faculty at Cornell University. You have a class that's coming up. So first of all, Danielle, can you welcome to the podcast and just dig into a little bit of your background there? How did you get into this world of consulting and helping the people that you do?
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me. Incredibly excited to be here. I definitely accidentally fell into the world of people management. I struggled when I reflected on my experiences as an employee. There were a lot of things that I felt like, why is this so difficult to achieve? Things like growing within the company and really continuing to be engaged in my work. I went into every job I had really excited by the opportunities. I wanted to do great work. I wanted to work hard, and I was particularly interested in my roles and in the work I was doing and in the companies I was working for. But for some reason, that enthusiasm, that energy that I started out with never really continued through my trajectory. It was really hard to keep it up. And I went to get my M.B.A. To learn why. What is it that's really happening on the leadership side that makes it so hard for employees like me to stay engaged and energized at work? Through my research in my M.B.A., I ended up starting my company, Sandbox, and we'll get into, sure, a little bit of what that does. And through speaking with really incredible leaders, I ended up writing my book, The Energy of Weirdos, which really focuses on unlocking the science behind people-first leadership and combining great insights from leaders with the research out there to explain why it works and how we can all do this. So it's been a really exciting journey. I'm excited to dig into it.
So when you think about, and when you started your organization, your company, I mean, I know that what are the key issues that you were seeing in the workplace that you were trying to solve?
Yeah, one of the key distinctions I found was the disconnect between what employees thought, what team members thought, and what the leaders thought. And it was this sense that people were not on the same team. And team members would tell me, oh, I have to be very careful when I go into my one-on-ones. I have to really have it figured out, oh, this is what I want my next career step to be, if I'm going to vocalize that to my manager. HR would often not allow people to transfer internally until they'd been in their role for a year. That was leading people to say, well, I guess I should leave and go to another company. If at 6 months I'm not happy, in 6 months I can get a different job, or in 2 more months I can get a different job. And there was this disconnect in sort of the entrepreneurship world. You mentioned that I'm teaching this fall. We say information was getting lost, data was getting lost. What data was getting lost was what employees were excited about, what they really wanted to do to lean into their work. And the reason that was important data is because that's the data that allows people to learn and grow at an organization, and it allows leaders to effectively leverage all of their talent. So leaders didn't know that they had a great graphic designer on their team. leaders didn't know that someone on their team actually really loved accounting work, or really loved working with specific clients, or really loved thinking about something else or trying whatever it was. And they were missing out on those talents, which ultimately led to revenue loss. I shouldn't say revenue loss. It ultimately led to people leaving on one hand, and then it led to also the cost of hiring someone else to do that job. So they were basically like, they're doubling, they're getting hit twice with the same mistake. And so we wanted to capture that information.
And so, and have you noticed that there's, I mean, if we just look at the way different generations think about work, have you experienced differences? I mean, it just, to me, it seems like, if we look back 10, 15 years ago, people stayed at organizations longer. And then as we've been advancing for the several years after that, it just seems like turnover is getting more and more, and tenure at organizations becomes less and less. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so Gen Zs are one of the hardest working generations, but there's actually a great quote that I love from an article. It says, the hardest working generation when they want to be. And I just love that because isn't it so true? So Gen Z and somewhat millennials, but to a very slightly lesser extent, have grown up in an information now era. So as we know, millennials have it a little less because their childhood was in the early 90s, before these technologies were widely adopted. But Gen Z has grown up that if they want an answer to a question, they can have it in milliseconds. And so now what's happened is you get into the workforce and you say you're an employee, 24 years old, 22 years old if you're Gen Z, and you say, okay, I am interested in doing more of this type of work. This is my first role. I would love to stay at the company. And this is a true story. I had a leader tell me, we had a 22-year-old employee. She started out in customer service. She told us that she actually didn't love, being on the customer side, account manager, customer service. Sorry, I misspoke there. She wanted to lean into something else, something that wasn't customer facing. And so we're working on that to help her get there. And I said to him, what are you doing? He said, well, her manager told me, I'm the CEO, I've told other managers to keep an eye out for opportunities that she can work on. And I said, how long ago was that? He said, oh, I don't know. It's been about 3 weeks. And I said, and what's happening with her? I said, what do you mean? She's doing her job. He said, to you, it's been 3 weeks of we're working on it. To the employee, that's been 3 weeks every single day going into work and saying, I gained the courage to speak up to my boss, to tell them I want to do something else, and nothing has happened because we are used to things happening immediately. And so what I started to build with Sandbox was to address that exact problem, which is now that employee, instead of having to wait 3 weeks for people to maybe hear of an opportunity and remember her and think of her, she can go into Sandbox and raise her hand for an opportunity that's interesting to her. At the same time, leaders all over the company, including her own manager, are seeing her come up, being recommended for opportunities that align with her interests and skill sets. So instead of a conversation slowly happening and everyone trying to remember, it's now always working in the background. And this employee has autonomy over their career. They have autonomy over how they grow and develop within the company. And the company isn't going to lose her because of a disengagement or a delay.
So it's also beneficial in terms of being able to, promote and recognize talent within the organization. Because if I'm a manager sitting in another group, I don't know what talent is inside my own company. And a lot of times I have a job to fill or skills that I need, and I'm looking to the external market rather than inside.
Exactly correct. So often, even in my experience, in one of my roles, I had brought a research skill set from a previous job, but in my current role, that wasn't in my job description. So my company was actually missing out on this skill set. My immediate team was able to leverage it because I voiced it to them, but no one outside my team knew that they were sitting on this skill set. So actually, after I left, I had connected with someone on a different team, and he said, we paid a freelancer hundreds of thousands of dollars to do this work that you wanted to do. We were already paying you. And like, it wasn't a far cry from my existing role. It was easily added in to my work. So the company ultimately lost me because I left and got disengaged. But they were also spending all of this money where they didn't have to. And you're right, the same with promoting from within as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know that there's there's tasks and pieces of every role that are not a lot of fun, right? And to the extent that we can, collaborate among our internal network of peers and figure out what certain people like and what some people don't like. I mean, we can shift around tasks, right? To where it's done by people that have more passion for the task. Is that right?
It's exactly right. And I mean, that's part of the premise of the book and why the title is The Energy of Weirdos. We are all unique or weird in our own ways. And when we're able to align what we are working on to our unique weirdness, to our unique superpowers, we're able to get more done. Of course, from a productivity standpoint, why are we getting more done? Because the work is actually interesting to us. And we've all experienced this in our daily lives, right? We think about a task that we're excited to do. We jump in, we do it. We are often more creative with it too, because that's how our minds work. The nodes are connecting and firing. We're more excited and energized when we finish the task. We say like, oh, wow, like I did it. That was great. Instead of, oh my God, I can't believe I finally finished that. Oh, sometimes people even fall asleep during a task because it's so draining. And so we have to give the right work to the right person. And no two people are going to have the same carbon copy of what they love, even when those two people have the same job title. So understanding these nuances will really help motivate but energize the team. And we won't look at those bored faces anymore and say, oh my God, my team is moving and grooving and all excited. And you just know that fantastic work is going to come out of them when you do this.
But it also means getting companies to change the way they think, because more often than not, companies are still thinking about boxes that they have to fill. So I have this box and I need these skill sets and that's it. So you really got to get companies to change the way they look at their employees.
Yeah, and you touched on the name of the podcast for that reason, Unboxing Humans, because we are very used to putting people in boxes. And on some level, it's because that's how our minds work, right? We want to create a shortcut for what this person does, who this person is, when I should turn to this person. And that's fine to an extent, but we miss out on everything that that person has to offer when we do it. So yes, it does involve the company shifting how they think about job titles and work and skill sets. But so many great managers have learned to naturally do it. So many new managers who want to be great managers don't know how to accomplish it. And the bigger your team, the harder it is to accomplish, because we are only human. We cannot remember everything about a specific person. So it does involve companies shifting this perspective and saying, okay, who are these people who I have? How can I effectively leverage that talent while also ensuring that everyone is empowered and engaged and really working to their fullest, and not from a robotic standpoint of input, output, do more and more productivity. The productivity is an aftermath of making sure everyone is aligned to the right work.
That's great. Yes. Good mantra. So before we get into more of what your software can do, I'd love to dive deeper into your podcast and the stories that you've learned through that. So how long have you had your podcast so far?
Yeah, the podcast just finished its second season. We started it in February. We have about 6 episodes per season. And they're really deep conversations with inspiring leaders about the weird moments that led them to where they are today. And I started it because I loved interviewing people for my book, quite frankly. I would hear these stories and I would feel so moved. And in a book, it gets translated into text. And unfortunately, I can't print the transcript of my interviews. It doesn't make for a particularly exciting read. So I felt that so much of what made this story special ended up getting lost. And I wanted to capture it. And so I started the podcast so people can hear others and their stories and their interests and what sparked them, and say, oh, wow, okay, like I see how this person ended up becoming a serial entrepreneur. I see how this person took something that would be a very negative experience and ended up flipping it into something positive because of the spirit that he had, because of the causes he cared about. And maybe I can do the same on my team or in myself.
So is there a particular memorable story that you can share with us?
Oh, there's so many. So I had the pleasure of interviewing Jennifer Dulski recently. She is a multi-time founder, but she is currently working actually on an HR tech company. So definitely go check her out and her work. And she was telling me that she actually started after college in a nonprofit. She spun up her own branch of a school that focuses on immigrant children and on children where English is often not their first language. I said, what an interesting choice for a 22-year-old straight out of college. You don't often hear, I'm gonna build a school. And she started to tell me about how, for her, it started as a teenager and this interest in education, and how her experiences ended up continuously leading her back to impact because she kept following what seemed interesting, even though there wasn't a clear path. So when she was an undergrad, she chose to, I'm going to get it wrong, but I think she chose to study in the Amazon. And not because anyone said this is the best place to study, not because it seemed like the best choice for her major, but because she saw the opportunity and she said, that seems cool and interesting, I'll do it, right? And making that choice ended up leading her to another choice, and exposing her to these different things that ultimately led her to start a school, which ultimately led her to go work at different tech companies, including Yahoo. She was at Yahoo for a long time, and then ultimately start her own company, all focused back on impact because of these experiences that just seemed interesting to her. So I love that story. And in the podcast, Jennifer tells it much better than I just did. So definitely hear her words, which is why I have the podcast, hear her words, because it just shows the power of following what is interesting to you, but what may not seem like the right step at the time, because the dots always connect looking backwards, not looking forwards. And I hear so often from leaders that they would have never predicted they ended up in the position they ended up in if you had asked them, when they were 22 or when they were 15, or even when they were 45, right? They would said, I would have never guessed this is what I'd be doing, but I took this job, it seemed interesting. I took the next job, it seemed interesting. I was offered this specific project at work, it seemed interesting. And they just followed that thread and were able to create an amazing life for themselves and then have a huge impact on others because of that. And that is the takeaway I have every single time. Follow what's interesting.
Yeah, it's nice to have that. I mean, more and more, there's the flexible workplaces where you're able to explore the different things that you're interested in. You're able to have flexibility to do work in different places, places that inspire you versus going to the office or, these different tasks and so forth. So
it's the places we work as absolutely, as well as the type of work we're doing. I mean, someone could be sitting here listening to us and say, oh, I never thought about HR software before in this way, or aligning skills in this way. And they then want to do more, explore more with it. And if there's an opportunity within their organization to apply that interest in some way, they're going to approach that problem with all of their knowledge and skill sets from their different experiences, right? And they'll come up with a more creative solution for it, often than someone who might be spending their whole life in it, because they just have a more unique point of view. Collaborating with different people will lead to creative, innovative solutions as well.
Yeah, certainly. Danielle, your podcast and ultimately your software seems so focused on understanding an employee's motivation. Do you think that, the current workforce kind of struggles with fitting this fast-paced society into kind of a legacy corporate architecture where you're trying to fit people who have, like you said, they're so used to getting information right at hand, but then they're stuck in the bureaucracy of companies now?
Yeah, I think companies today and companies of the past have focused largely on extrinsic motivators. So they focused on bonuses, they focused on happy hours, free beer in the office, ping pong tables, everything that is outside of oneself to motivate their team members. And what we saw in the pandemic was that suddenly all of these things failed because there was no extrinsic motivator to offer someone. People had to show up to work because they were genuinely excited by the work. And now that we're out of the pandemic, we're seeing those extrinsic rewards start to creep back in. Or he's like, come to the office, we'll give you free lunch. Come to the office, we'll do this. And it's not working so well. People feel very strongly, we were talking about this before we went live, on whether they should come back in or not. And what companies are missing out on is the intrinsic motivator. So companies are really missing out on motivating people from within, what genuinely excites them. I'm often met with the question from both leaders and team members, well, work doesn't really excite me. And to that, I say, you chose this job for a reason. So we have to remind ourselves what those reasons are. Make a list of all the things, work and otherwise, that you just really enjoy doing. No one has to pay you to do them. No one has to give you the free pizza. You would do them. And then make a list of your work responsibilities or what happens at your company and start to align those lists. Say, oh, a lot of my stuff is creative on the first ones of things that I love. How can I be more creative at work? That's something I'm missing from my work. And that will help intrinsically motivate people. When we do that, we will be able to have a more dynamic society because we will be following human nature rather than trying to change behavior based on extrinsic motivators.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it seems like kind of a shift just in the thought process too, and intrinsic motivations, understanding, like you said, what drives yourself. Whereas I think, a lot of managers are thinking about, what do we need to fill this position? Like we said before, the boxing people in, this is what the job requires. Is this the right person or is this the right person? Well, maybe that job really is multiple people that need to come together.
And how many times have we heard from wonderful leaders that they say skills can be taught, right? Attitude cannot, hire for attitude over skill set, right? Over and over and over. Well, what they're saying there is that this person is coming in excited to learn and grow, because when people are learning and growing, they stay intrinsically motivated because we're leaning into what interests us. When we hire just for a skill set, and I'm not saying to hire people who are unqualified by any means, hire people who are qualified, but when we are hiring just for a skill set that someone currently has rather than their capacity, we are missing out on their ability to learn and grow, and we're putting them in a box, and we're not looking at the future of that employee within the company and how they'll really grow and learn within the organization.
Well, Danielle, what have you learned as your software's been out for a while now? So what have you learned from having your software out and helping companies?
The biggest, there's been some shocking things, even just on my team, which have really surprised me. One of my favorite stories, I'll go through a few of my favorite stories. So on my team, we were reviewing some of our legal documents, our terms and conditions, which I'll be honest, is not my favorite read. It does not fall into my interest set. But to my surprise, my engineer surfaced as a recommended team member for that, I'll say that task, because it's not really a project. And I reached out to him and I said, Guillermo, what? Like, what, you're interested in reading the terms and conditions? I mean, come on. And he said to me that he had a particular interest because whatever is in there needs to be reflected in the code. And he sees a congruence that, of course, was there, right? Whatever we say we're doing on a legal standpoint needs to be what we're actually doing in the back end. But he really wanted to read the document and make sure that they aligned. He's probably, he was a great addition to reading this information because he's actually the one building it out. And I was so thankful that I had his skill set to leverage. Another story is my marketer, actually, when we were launching the podcast, she came up that she had experience in video production and editing. I said, Ivy, you're 22. When did you do this? And she actually, when she was 18, she had a YouTube channel, and she is a self-taught video producer and editor. And so instead of paying someone, hiring someone freelance to edit the podcast, she was unbelievably excited to edit the podcast and lean into that type of work, which also then helped with the rest of the marketing work she was doing, because it gave her more insight into the types of conversations that were being had, often insight into some of our customers that she wasn't as privy to. So, and allowed her to create more content for our social media marketing. And a non-work, I'll say on a more extracurricular related note, what we call initiatives in Sandbox. We have someone who was working at a health tech company, and she also sat on some charity boards outside of her role. And she was spending basically all of her non-work time organizing different healthcare related events, whether mostly panels with people in industry. And she was looking for people to attend those events that were usually small donations to whatever charity she was working with. So HR was really excited because there was someone who was actually creating events that people in the company would find interesting and want to attend and want to learn more about healthcare related. And the team member was really excited because, one, she could fill the events more, which is always great when you're planning events, but also she was able to collaborate with different people in the company who brought more ideas in, who brought more experts in to be on these panels, and sometimes even more funding to put the event together. So it was this wonderful collaboration where the company was able to offer so much more, and the team member was able to lean in more to those initiatives that she was already working on.
Those are some great stories. Well, Danielle, can we dive into a little bit of your system and take a look at each piece? So when you were designing this system, what type of companies did you have in mind that would be best suited for it?
Yeah, something we noted very early on in just the research phase before we even started building was that the industry was agnostic. We were solving a fundamentally human problem. Like we talked about earlier, we were helping people be intrinsically motivated in a very academic sense. But really at the end of the day, we realized that we were building a two-sided platform. On one side, we were helping leaders effectively leverage their talent. And on the other side, we were helping team members take ownership of their career and their development within the company. And every feature that we put into our product really keeps those two sides true to each other. So you'll see when we dive into it, there's the flip side of both, and they're constantly working together. The onus is never always on the manager, and the onus is never always on the employee. And in doing that, we also ended up solving a lot of DEI issues along the way, which is really exciting for us as well. So I can share my screen and dive in. So I like to caveat one thing, which is, oh, you know what, let me move this down a little little bit so you can see. Okay. Which is that we are in a demo account. So I always like to preface, we are in a demo account. Note that as we go through. And so what we've landed on here is we have our manager, Marley, in the top right corner. And we are seeing all of Marley's team members. So Marley has 5 team members. This could be, this is Marley's immediate team. You'll see as we go through, we are pretending that Marley is the director of the Parks Department in Pawnee, Indiana. So it is Parks and Rec themed for anyone who's a fan of the NBC TV show. And so what Marley is seeing are all of her team members at a glance and how aligned each team member is between their interests and the work that they're doing. So I'm just going to jump into Ashlyn for a moment. So you can see here, this is Ashlyn Kim. Here's a picture Ashlyn uploaded this information about herself. Ashlyn also put in these 5 interests, and the colors do mean something here. So the colors equate to skill level, and you can see those skill levels down here at the bottom in the graph. So Ashlyn can choose for each interest area if she is a shadow, a collaborate, or a drive. And this is something that we thought a lot about because we didn't want people to feel that one skill level was better than another. This is about an employee being able to develop their interests and develop their skill sets within the company and ultimately grow their careers within the company. So here, Ash, go ahead.
So let's just dive into that a little bit more. I mean, when we're looking at shadow, collaborate, and drive, can we take that apart a little bit? What does each one of those pieces mean?
Yeah, so we ended up choosing these words because they were the words that people naturally said to us in interviews when they described how they work on a project. Early on in their careers, they often shadow someone. Hey, can I sit in on that? Sometimes in fields, it's literally shadowing. If you're in medicine, you're literally shadowing someone a lot of the time early on in your career. So shadow is someone who is a novice at whatever the skill set or interest is. So in the case of Ashlyn here, community development and environmental impact are her shadows. This is the light pink color, and you see it down here. So Ashlyn has indicated that she's interested in this type of work, but she's really new to it. She may have done it before, maybe not. She's very, very new to it. Collaborate is the next level up. She's done it before. She has a fair handle on it, but she is not ready to lead the project. Drive is then leading the project. She has done this. She knows how to do it. Give her the reins. She let her fly. And what starts to get really cool about these interests, about these skill levels, is that then you can pair people up. So if Ashlyn is a drive and you have another team member who's a shadow, you put them on the project together, and then they can learn from each other, right? So then your shadow ultimately upskills to become a collaborate and then a drive of their own. These skill levels, people tend to really love them because they, once again, are not indicating that any level is better than the other. We don't have anyone claiming that they're a drive when they are in fact a collaborate, because there's no benefit in the system to making that claim. So I can keep going on.
Yeah, I think Sam's frozen, but I think that's awesome because typically if it was a 1, 2, or a 3, or weak, strong, expert, you would want to say, I maybe I'm weak, but I don't want to say that because it could be challenging to really admit that. But then being able to just identify that this is somewhere I want to grow is good for everyone to see.
That's exactly what it was. People don't want to be the lowest level. They feel a little weird about saying I'm a low level, especially when they are a more seasoned employee, right? If someone has been at the organization for even a few years, they don't want to put that they are not experienced at something new. There is sort of a bias in that internally because we want to be great at what we do, and they are great at what they do. They're just saying they want to grow in these areas. And so we have to be able to let them do that. So that's how we chose those skill levels. And we find that they come really naturally to people when they're inputting these interests. If it was 1, 2, 3, you often get the question, is one good or bad? Is one the lowest or the highest, right? This, everyone's like, oh, I'm a shadow. That makes sense. Like, I'm shadow. Oh, it makes sense. I collaborate. Makes sense. I drive. And making it user-friendly was also incredibly important to us.
And easy for the managers, as you said, because ultimately, if there's an initiative or a project that has to be completed, and being able to say, you know, this could be the person who's going to lead that project, and these two people can, you know, work together and create a well-motivated team. It seems like it's pretty straightforward right from the get-go.
Thank you.
Can you walk us through the bottom of that, where it's talk about development, where you have the line graph?
Yes. And so this is where I like to remind people that we are on a demo account.
Yeah.
You do not want your employees' development to look like this. That would be bad. But what we're seeing here is Ashlyn's development. So we are seeing her, we ideally want to see her go from a shadow to a collaborate to a drive, because that would be someone developing their skill set and improving to the next level. Where it would be a problem, right, is if we see something like this. So this would indicate that Ashlyn started out thinking she was a drive. This is, by the way, only for operations and only the last 7 days. These are toggles to change the interest area and the time frame. So if Ashlyn started out as a drive and then suddenly plummeted the next day thinking that she's a shadow, what happened there? And that's great information for the leader, right? Potentially Ashlyn was right. She thought that she was a drive, but whoa, she was wrong. That's rarer. Chances are that something happened on the project that made her feel like maybe she's not good enough. Maybe someone who she was paired on the team with indicated to her that she was wrong and she lost her confidence in it. We find very rarely does someone truly go from a drive to a shadow, because people don't set themselves up for failure at work. People want to do a good job at work. And
so Ashlyn's actually doing this on a day-to-day basis, kind of rating where she feels she is. Usually
she wouldn't. In the case of this demo account, yes, she has. Really what would happen, what happens in a workplace is that in the one-on-one with your manager, which usually happens every week or every 2 weeks, this becomes a way to talk about someone's progress. So the leader and the team member could sit together and go through these interests, say, hey, where are we with this? In here, they could see how many projects they've been given, right? So Ashlyn has been assigned to one, basically, of the 2 projects in community development. Maybe there's an opportunity here for Ashlyn to grow more along that interest area. So it really allows the leader to see where there's opportunity to grow, where they're not providing that opportunity, and how the team member is developing. So no longer do we get to December and year-end reviews and the team member says, well, I didn't really get any opportunities to develop this, even though I wanted to. Now it is working together every step of the way to ensure this team member is learning and growing. So when we get to a year-end review, it's like, of course, Ashlyn's ready for that next level. We made sure all year that she was ready for it.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah. So there's also on this team page, the dashboard. And the dashboard shows everyone at a glance. So here, and we'll play with these numbers so you can see how it changes. Everyone right now is on one opportunity, so that's why everyone's sort of hovered over here, but we'll see as we work with the system how it changes. Here's everyone's alignment at a glance. So this is where the leader, Marley, would quickly jump in and say, wow, Emerson is below 20%. That's a problem. The research shows that when interests align with our work, just 20% of the time, we can combat burnout. So it's an unbelievably low bar, right? So we can actually, it's like a shockingly low bar. So Emerson is falling just below it. We know that Emerson, it might be at risk of burnout or at risk of boredom. And so when we go into our opportunities page, this is where the magic starts to happen. So here Marley is seeing all of the opportunities that she owns within the company. So these are Marley's projects. Therefore, Marley has the authority to add people to them and create her team. So here we see the Pawnee Commons and the quick description of the Pawnee Commons and all of the skill sets needed to make this project a success. On the right side, we see the recommended teammates for this opportunity based on the skill sets needed and each team member's skill set. So here we see Ashlyn is interested in shadowing projects related to environmental impacts. We see that Nolan is interested in collaborating on projects related to city planning. But what's really interesting is we have Livia, who can drive projects related to partnerships, and Wilson, who is interested in shadowing projects related to partnerships. So we can actually add both Wilson and Livia to this opportunity. They've both been added. You see them on the project team down below. They've gotten a notification that they've been added. And depending on the project management system and how you connect it, you can connect this into your project management systems. They might be added to that project management system as well, if that's how your organization operates. And now they're able to learn from each other and develop. We mentioned before, we go back to the team page. So we've seen that Wilson's alignment went up. Wilson's 50% directly added to opportunities. So that's partnerships. He's been recommended 3 times. He's basically added once. And now if we go back to Emerson, who we saw was slightly problematic in the past, he's only at 17% aligned. We actually can go in and see where the problems are. So he's been added to one opportunity related to partnership, but none on community development, none on finance, none on PR, none on fundraising. So we're really missing opportunities to develop Emerson. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to go here and click Find Project. And what that's going to do is bring us back to the opportunities page. Our opportunities are filtered on finance, which was the interest area that we clicked on for Emerson. Here's Emerson, here's finance, and we can add Emerson to this opportunity. If we go back to the team page, we'll see that Emerson has been updated. His alignment jumped up. These alignments are weighted. That's why it jumped up so high. And so now he's developing along that interest area, truly in one click. Emerson also feels seen and heard by his leader now. He doesn't need to go and work up the courage to talk to his manager and say, hey, I think there's opportunities that I'm missing out on. Can I please be added to them? The person next to me at work keeps getting these opportunities and they don't like them and I want them. What's happening here? Which usually isn't the conversation that actually happens. Usually what would happen is Emerson would say, my manager doesn't care. And he would start to look for opportunities elsewhere. So this allows Emerson to be seen and heard, to develop along his interests, and his manager to ensure that he is consistently engaged and being effectively leveraged as a team member. So that's on the employee side, and I can switch over to the team member side as well, unless there are more questions on the employee side. I'm sorry, on the leader side.
I had a question a little bit from just kind of like the implementation. So is it just for managers and their direct reports, or does this work if you're a director and you have managers and then their direct reports? Can you look down from like a top-down view as well?
Yes, you absolutely can. So it builds like a traditional org chart. So if you picture an org chart, right, people at the top, and then it trees down, it branches down. That is how the permission settings work here. So Marley will only see her direct reports. The manager above Marley will see Marley's anyone else that manager manages, and then their direct reports as well. So you see everyone below you. You won't see someone lateral to you. So Wilson and Nolan won't see each other because it's not really Wilson's business how aligned Nolan is in his work, but it is up and down.
I see.
And that is true on the team page. On the opportunities page, you will see everyone who within the organization whose interests and skill sets align with your opportunities topics or with your opportunity skill sets.
Okay.
So, but that is a setting that you can turn on. So if you're working on something that might be, very classified within the company, you can select here. It's actually over here. You can select your team that what teams can see it, so you can control that privacy if you would prefer.
I see. So that means that if you're, say, Marley's manager, you could actually bypass her and add Emerson to a team because you see he's not getting the focus he needs, and in that way you could have a discussion with Marley, but ultimately make the decision to bring him in.
Yeah, we find that what happens more often is on the HR side. They're able to, HR team members are able to add different employees to initiatives that they'd be interested in. So they're able to put together employee resource groups. Employees are able to add each other to the panel on women in leadership. They're able to form running clubs and such like that. We don't often find that directors have to go sort of above the manager, but we do find that it does help HR evaluate their leaders within the company as well. If there's a certain team, which we've all seen happen, right? Sometimes like people drop like flies on this one team. It's like, what is happening over there? This allows HR to really keep their finger on the pulse of the organization, and senior leadership to keep their finger on the pulse and say, what's happening with this team member? Is there a reason they're not getting opportunities? Is this something we can address early on? Sometimes VPs do have one-on-ones with their larger teams. And so maybe that's something they can address in their one-on-ones as well.
Yeah, thank you. It's just a really interesting way to look at it. I mean, typically you wouldn't be able to just see a list of all someone's interests and be able to assign them to projects. It would just be, oh, I remember that they said they wanted to work in finance, or they had an interest in community planning, and this really brings it all together.
That's exactly what it is. We've been relying on our memory, and the data gets lost. We're only human. We can't remember what everyone wants at every given time as much as we want to be great leaders. And so let's all work together to help people do what they love and what they're capable of within the company.
Perfect. And of course, and this is not just work either. This is volunteer opportunities, groups, clubs, anything like that.
Yes, exactly. So over here where we add a different opportunity, this demo is set to projects, but you can add a project, an initiative, or a job. And so projects is basically what I say is day-to-day work. Initiatives are those extracurriculars, those engagement activities that really are helpful as an added layer, right, to create a wonderful company culture. And employee resource groups and all of these amazing initiatives that usually HR works on and rewards management works on as well. And then jobs actually creates an internal marketplace for candidates. So instead of posting your internal jobs just to Greenhouse, of course, you can use that or Workday, you can use those softwares to manage the posting, but you can have them filter into Sandbox with a simple connection, and they will all show up in the Discover page for team members. So Marley owns all of these projects. We can flip into the employee account. Actually, I'll do that so you can see, because it's a great segue. Sorry. So if we flip into the employee account, so here we're in Nolan's account. He is seeing the opportunities available to him within the system. And so you can see on the Pawnee-Eagleton Reservoir merger bill, again, Parks and Rec themed, he's already a team member. But over on Time Capsule, he can actually raise his hand to be a member of the opportunity. And here he can select to shadow, collaborate, or drive on this opportunity. He's going to raise his hand to collaborate. that sent a message to the opportunity owner that Nolan is interested in being on this project. It has also added this little hand raise icon to Nolan's icon on the recommended teammates. So now they're able to see that Nolan is recommended and he's raising his hand for the opportunity.
It's nice that it's so visual too. It makes you feel heard. It's pretty.
We wanted it to be very interactive. So obviously at a glance, the colors mean something as well.
Yeah.
You could
Oh,
see
the
it.
drive. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So can you show us how you go about, as a team member, like selecting what you're interested in?
Yeah, so that's going to be there. When you sign up, there's a specific walkthrough, but we can
Mhm.
also adjust Nolan's profile over here. So all we did was click on Nolan and go into his settings. So here is really Nolan's interest page. So he's operations, fundraising, PR, city planning, and partnerships. Again, this is a fictional parks department.
Yeah.
He can edit these at any time. So let's choose partnerships. He can update it to be collaborate or drive. And you'll see the visibility here as well. So his visibility is company-wide. Potentially, he only wants his manager to see this for whatever reason. Maybe he specifically wants to explore it with a class, and he's interested in his manager knowing that or talking about it in their next one-on-one, or just the team or company-wide. Most people pick company, but it just adds for a little bit of extra protection on the employee side if they don't want everyone to see what this interest is just yet. They'll save. And then he's also able to add new interests. So these are both crowdsourced and vetted. So within a company, you can create your own interest bucket. We recommend using some of the ones that have already been added as well, because when we sit down as leaders and say, this is what everyone could be interested in, we're going to miss things. And so it's much better to have your employees contributing to that. But pick any interest. If it's not in there, it can be added. So we'll just say networking. We could choose whatever we want. Fundraising. There's all sorts of things in here. Research. I was working with an interior design company and they said you could be interested in couches. I said, that's not in there. But all we had to do was type in couch and it added it in for them and their team members. They picked their skill level and they would pick the visibility and they would go ahead and save that. So there it is. You'll notice it's not starred. And that's because we allow 5 interests at a time.
Okay.
Because if someone's interested in everything, it becomes very difficult for the leader to actually give them the right opportunities. So that's fine. You can update them at any time, but let's focus on 5 at a time. And then if you want to change one, you're welcome to.
Just forces people to be more critical as well about what they want to do.
Exactly. 5 things at a time. I'll also note that the system is smart. So Nolan here put research strategy. If a leader tags something as research and not research strategy, that will still match. So Nolan will still be recommended, even though they used slightly different language.
This is great stuff. Thank you so much, Danielle, for showing this to us.
Thank you for your questions, and I'm glad everyone found it interesting. I hope those listening also enjoyed it, and if they have more questions, please feel free to reach out. Yeah.
And where do they find you?
Yeah, they can find me on LinkedIn, Danielle Boris, through the Sandbox website, sandboxtogether.com. Have trouble remembering it. We build a better workplace together. And those are really the 2 best ways. And of course, you can always listen to the podcast if you just want to follow the work as well, or read the book.
Right. Podcast, Unboxing Humans. Definitely a good listen. Sure.
Thank you. And my personal website is danielleboris.com if they're interested in the things I talk about, but Sandbox together for the software.
Yes. And can you tell, and you're getting ready to teach a course at Cornell. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to be a studio coach for Cornell on their tech campus here in New York on Roosevelt Island. And it's actually the program I went through to launch Sandbox. So I'm really excited to come back and now be able to teach part of that course alongside my other studio coaches. And the program is very cool. So all of the master students at Cornell's tech campus have to go through a program they call Studio. And they work in the fall with different companies on how might we statements. So problems that companies are seeing broadened to a larger issue, and the students work to solve those problems and come up with innovative solutions with their company advisors. And then in the spring, they go into Startup Studio mostly, or Big Co Studio. And they actually can develop those ideas into real startups and real companies.
Cool.
So it is incredibly exciting. I'll be working with the students to really hone their ideas and make sure that they're adding values in the right way and creating impact.
Great.
Yeah, well, what an honor and inspiration. So to be able to be selected to come back and be part of the same program that launched your product yourself.
I'm incredibly excited. I've had the opportunity to teach and guest lecture in the past at other universities, and I found it incredibly rewarding. So very excited to get back into the classroom and to work with these amazing students who are going to build products that change the way we live and work. It's going to be wonderful.
Well, thank you, Danielle, for sharing your knowledge with us and taking us through your software. It's very impressive. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Take care, and we'll see everybody else next month on the Rewards Mastermind.
Bye all.
Bye, everyone.